Hi everyone, welcome. This is not our first Torah class, but it's the first in a very long time. Thank you for being here. I really, and I've spoken to you guys a lot about this on Instagram. I want to teach more Torah. I want to learn more Torah. Since October 7th, there's so many things I can say, but learning Torah is so good for the soul. It is so good for you. It's how we feed our soul, our Jewish soul. And anytime I stop learning, I kind of start to feel a little bit sick. It's literally who we are. It's who we are. So thank you for being here. Thank you for putting yourself first and feeding your soul. Learning Torah is it's everything. It's literally like an anchor. It is, it aligns us with ourselves. It's a reminder of MS, of truth, in a really confusing, chaotic, fast-paced world. Before we get started, I want to thank Koren Publishers for sponsoring this Torah class tonight. I bought this Tanakh myself with my own money in Tzfat about a month ago. I was in Israel for October 7th, and then I was there for about a month until my brother's wedding, and I was just like so starving for Torah, and I was like, I think I was pushing it off because I was like, it's too complicated. I'm in Israel, all my siblings are here, and I'm so busy. And I said to myself, Rachalea, make it simple, make it easy. So I went to Tzfat because my husband and I were going there before we left back to America. And I stopped in a Judaica store and I said, I want the Koren Tanakh, which I'm so happy that I get to partner with them now because it's in Hebrew and English with no commentaries. And I literally, some mornings, I'll just wake up, brush my teeth, wash my face, get dressed, make a coffee, and I'll sit in like the smushy corner of my couch and I'll just read through the Torah in English. I'm telling you guys, because, on Instagram I've been saying a lot that we should make Torah, learn more Torah. It's so good for you. It's going to change your life. It's going to electrify you. It's going to bring more peace and clarity to you and to your soul and your mind and your heart. But sometimes we don't do it because it's so complicated. Like we don't understand the Hebrew and it's this ancient text. We have to find a class and we don't understand it. It's as simple as I would buy this Tanakh to start. I literally use this almost every day. I'm actually learning a lot about King David right now. And sometimes you don't want to hear the commentaries. You just want to read the Torah in your language in English without it being so complicated. So many mornings I'll wake up and I'll start my day just reading the Torah in English from my Koren Tanakh. So Koren, thank you it's what an honor to work with you. I bought this with my own money, guys. I only recommend things I actually use. Okay, so tonight we are going to do, I don't know how long this Torah class is going to be. This is the first in a while, so let's see how it goes. But I'm so happy and excited to learn. So this week's Parsha is Shemos. It's the first Parsha of the second book of the Torah. And this is like the beginning of our story as a nation, not just as father and son, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. By the way, if you guys prefer more English or more Hebrew, you let me know in the comments. So I'm going to do Hebrew for now, but if you don't understand it or it's hard for you, let me know. In this week's Parsha, we are introduced to the Jewish people in Egypt, and it's the beginning of the life of Moshe. You can't really understate how important Moshe is in our life. Like the entire Torah is called like the 5 books of Moses. There is something so magnetic about him. There's something so incredible about him. I'm not just saying this. As a teenager, I connected to Moshe so much. I loved to read his story. I just felt very connected to Moshe. I also had a Chumash teacher, a Bible study teacher who loved Moshe, so maybe she gave me her love for him. He just was so truthful, so honest, so holy, so holy. Like there were moments where, he was talking to God face to face and his face was like ablaze. Like it was like there was light coming out of his face, and he was so human, but so holy. And he was the most devoted leader. He gave up everything for us. And he did things that don't seem so Jewish. Like he fought with God and he defied God. And he was very chutzpahdik. He was very audacious at certain points. And he defended us and protected us and used bad excuses to protect us and defend us even when we were wrong as a nation. Like the sin of the calf and the sin of the spies. And I just love Moshe. And I think, and you'll hear the class, in this week's Parsha, we really understand his greatness. Like there's a moment in time where Moshe, who he actually is, just comes to life. So we're going to learn it. The reason I think in this week's Parsha that Moshe becomes like the greatest Jew that ever lived, he was the greatest Jew that ever lived, and you can feel it actually in Chabad Hasidus, and maybe we'll learn this another time. Moshe, the spirit of Moses, kind of lives on through every single generation, which is why we feel so connected to him. He kind of feeds our faith. He literally feeds our faith in the Torah and as Jews now, but that's for another time. Moses is so human and relatable because in this life, and this is something I think about probably daily, and I really dealt with this in my teenage years. I was such an angsty teenager. I was a real truth seeker. Connecting to who you actually are and living an emes-dik life. Emes-dik means like truthful, a life of emes, a life of truth. And you guys know I talk about this a lot, choosing truth. I think it's probably the reason we're here. One of the reasons we're here on earth in a body, on like living in houses and being alive, is that God wants us to choose truth. It's like the meaning of life, and it's the hardest thing to do, to actually be who you are. This is why I try to encourage people to learn Torah, because Torah brings you back to yourself. It's like every time I learn this Torah, it's like an introduction to myself all over again. There's just nothing like it. And it's really hard to stay in touch with who you are and live a true full life. And we think of Moses as like Mr. Holy. You know, he spoke to God face to face and he gave us the Torah, and he didn't eat for like 120 days when he was on top of Har Sinai, Mountain Sinai. Moses was so human. Moses killed someone. I know I'm jumping steps here, but like, we're going to learn it in a minute. Moshe actually killed someone. He killed a Mitzri, an Egyptian, because he sexually assaulted a Jewish woman. Moses was confronted with the most human problem, this Herculean task, which is to choose to be your truest self. Again, we think of Moses, and we'll get into the story now, as like this, the man of God and like the servant of God and the man who gave us the Torah. Moses lived as an Egyptian. Moses was brought up as an Egyptian. Moses and the Mefarshim, the commentators, which we're not going to do tonight, tell us, they're all fighting about whether Moses knew he was Jewish or not, or whether he connected to his Jewishness or not. And a lot of them say Moses absolutely knew that he was Jewish, and even though he knew he was Jewish, he lived in Pharaoh's palace, and he sat with like the dignitaries and the officers and like the prime ministers and the emperors, if they had those. I guess Pharaoh can be considered an emperor, but Moses was like an important Egyptian. Like, he was a cool guy. He wasn't like the holiest guy in the world. He was a normal person. He lived as an Egyptian. The word Moshe, the name Moshe, is not a Hebrew Jewish name. It's an Egyptian name given to Moses by Pharaoh's daughter Batya. Moses wasn't like Mr. Perfect. And it makes me love him. My love for him is in his imperfection. It's in his struggle to live his truest life. He didn't start off as Moses of the Torah. He started off as grandson of Paro, a Pharaoh. I just I'm telling you, it knocks the breath out of me every single time. That the holiest Jew that ever lived was an outsider. He was different. Who even know? Well, I don't know. I was gonna say who knows if he ate kosher his whole life. I mean, I think there's a commentary that said I know there is, that he wouldn't drink the milk of Egyptian, the breast milk of Egyptian women, because it wasn't considered kosher or something like that. But Moses was an Egyptian. He was an Egyptian, and he is constantly battling himself. He wrestles with himself to be his truest self. And we'll say one last thing before we get into our holy Torah. But all of us in our life, and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, we have that kol demama daka, which that's in Hebrew. In English, it means the still, small voice within us. It is the voice of emes. It is the voice of truth. And it's our decision to listen to it or deny it, to acknowledge it or ignore it, to honor it or just avoid it for the whole of our lives and never be true to who we are. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe, I'm a Chabadnik, you guys know this already, is a perfect example to me, a prime example of a human being who chose to live a completely truthful life. He had a soul and he listened to it his whole life. What more can I ask for in life? That is like my job. Every single day I wake up, I say Moda'ani, I daven, I pray, and I just try to be true to my soul. I'm a Jew. God is real. The Torah is real. Our mission is real. Moses was real. Be true to who you are. Learn Torah. Understand what the Torah is. It's a connection to God. Understand what the mitzvos are, the commandments. You're connected to the creator of the world. It's a phenomenal thing. It's unbelievable, kind of, but we can miss out on it our whole lives because we're ignoring that still small voice. Moses becomes the greatest Jew that ever lived, the greatest human being, I would say, that ever lived, in this one moment of choosing. It's just breathtaking. So let's go in. We are reading from Parshas Shemos, the first parsha of the second book of the Torah. And we are, where are we? We are in chapter 2, verse 1, okay? Chapter 2, verse 1. I'm only reading in English tonight. Moses is born in chaos, and we're going to see that he is pulled between being a Jew and being an Egyptian, being a Jew and being an Egyptian. What's more relatable to us living in a modern world? To live fully, jump into it, take it on fully, be a Jew all the way. Or deny who we actually are. What's more relatable than that? And even Moses went through that. So let's go in. He's born into chaos. Remember, the Jewish nation, they were like a glorious people, and they completely lost their shine and their glory because they were enslaved. And they pretty much lost, in many ways, who they were. So Moses is born into this. He also was almost killed as a baby. He almost didn't make it. The Egyptians were going to kill him. His mother. We're going to get into it now. I'm going to stop talking. Okay. Then Pharaoh, again, we're in chapter 2, verse 1. Then Pharaoh commanded his entire people, saying, "Throw every boy that is born into the Nile and let all the girls live." This is what Moses is born into. A man of the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. These are Moses' parents. And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw what a fine child he was, and for 3 months she kept him hidden. And when she could no longer hide him, she took a papyrus basket and coated it with tar and pitch. She laid the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile, and his sister stood by at a distance to see what would happen to him. So Moses is born as a Jew to Jewish parents and born into chaos. His parents are Jewish. He's a Jew, 100%. But he is sent away, in the earliest stage of his life from his family, into near death. He's born into madness. Pharaoh's daughter, we're in verse 5. Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the Nile while her attendants walked by the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw him there, the child. She saw Moshe. The boy was crying, and she was moved to pity for him. So now we're going into Moshe's Egyptianness. He started off as a Jew, and as a baby, these are hardly even memories for him. They're not memories for him. His identity is so convoluted. It is so complicated so early on. He's like two different people from birth. So she had pity for him. She sees Moshe in the basket as a baby. His mother sent him down the Nile because we know the Egyptians, when baby boys were born, they would kill them. So his mother, Tzipporah, saved his life and sent him down the Nile. And Batya, Paro's daughter, sees him in the basket. She sees him crying and she has pity for him. This must be one of the Hebrew boys. Then his sister asked Paro's daughter, "Shall I go fetch?" So now Moshe's sister is, watching Moshe down the Nile. And she speaks to Batya, Paro's daughter, and she said, "Should I go and fetch one of the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" So Moshe is born to a Jewish mother. That Jewish mother sends him away, and he lands in the hands of his Egyptian mother. And now his Egyptian mother has him, and she's speaking to Moshe's Jewish sister to bring Moshe's Jewish mother back to nurse him. I'm pretty sure it's Rashi. Again, this one, I love this Tanakh because there's no Rashi, there's no commentary, and for me that's easy sometimes. But I'm pretty sure it's Rashi who says that this was the wet nurse, the woman who was going to come and nurse Moshe, was his mother. So Moshe went from his mother to a different Egyptian mother, from a Jewish mother to an Egyptian mother, back to his Jewish mother, but he's going to live with his Egyptian mother. It's just so complicated. His identity is so confusing since his infancy. "Go," said Paro's daughter. So the girl went away and called the child's mother. It says that in the psukim. Okay. "Take this child," Paro's daughter told her. "Nurse him for me, and I will pay you your wage." So the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew, and he brought him to Paro's daughter, and he became her son. So the child grew, Moshe grew up, and she brought him to Paro's daughter, and he became her son. Even more complicated. It seems that Moshe was nursed for, let's say, 3 years by his mom. And then his real mom brings him to Paro's daughter, who's his Egyptian mom. I'm probably so confusing right now. Sorry. It's confusing. Moshe is like bouncing between moms and bouncing between religions and bouncing between identities. It's crazy. The child grew. Oh, we did that. So Moshe is officially Paro's daughter's son. He's officially an Egyptian, is what I'm trying to say. He's related to Paro, who enslaved and abused and is murdering the Jewish people. Moshe lives in his house. So now we are introduced to adult Moshe. We're on verse 11. "One day when Moshe had grown up, he went out to his people and saw their forced labor." So we're now seeing the friction in Moshe's life. Moshe was a baby with a very complicated identity. And he's now an adult with a very complicated identity, and he's having an identity crisis. Again, if we were going to go into more of the commentaries, we would see that they're fighting. The commentaries, like on the Torah, are fighting about whether Moshe thought of himself as Egyptian or thought of himself as a Jew. And some of the Farshim say, well, he thought of himself as an Egyptian because he was brought up around Paro. Other people say, no, he knew he was Jewish, but he was proud to be an Egyptian. Other people say, no, he knew he was Jewish, and he didn't feel like he was an Egyptian. It's so confusing. And you can see this pain and this suffering in Moshe. He lives in the palace with Paro. Why is he going out to see the Jewish people? It's probably dirty. It's probably gross. They're slaves. You can feel Moshe being pushed and pulled in different directions. And by the way, this suffering, maybe you could think about yourself for a minute. I know for myself for sure that when I'm not being true to myself, I suffer every single time. In any sphere of life, whenever I'm not being true to myself, which usually means to my soul, which usually means to Judaism and to God, I don't feel at ease. My peace is robbed. I'm robbed of my inner peace. And you can see this. Moshe grew up and he went out to see his people. He went out to his people and saw their forced labor. It's crazy that Moshe, this prince of Egypt, he's going out to see the Jews. And he noticed an Egyptian striking a Hebrew. So he sees an Egyptian abusing a Jew. He's hitting him. One of his brothers. He sees that this Egyptian is hitting a Jew who he considers one of his brothers. By the way, this Egyptian that's hitting the Jew sexually assaulted that Jew's wife. But we're not going to go into that. Again, we're staying with Pshat, which is like the simple explanation and understanding of the Torah tonight. So Moshe sees, to make it simple, Moshe sees an Egyptian hurting a Jew. This is one of the most profound psukim, verses in the entire Torah, in my opinion. Vayifen, I'm going to read it in Hebrew first. Pasuk Yud Beis, the 12th pasuk, verse. Vayifen kovacho. So Moshe sees this. And again, he is being pulled in two different... He's suffering because he has an identity crisis. And Moshe, I feel like God is just watching him, waiting for Moshe to make a decision. Vayifen kovacho. Moshe looked this way and he looked that way. Vayar ki ein ish. And Moshe saw that there was no man. Vayach es ha-Mitzri. He kills, he strikes the Mitzri. Vayit b'nehu b'chol. And he hid the Mitzri's body in the sand. If I squeeze this pasuk, I'm going to, try to reveal a deeper meaning in this verse for you. This is one of the most profound psukim in verses in the Torah. And I turn back to it all the time when I'm confused about myself and my life and my decisions. Moshe becomes the greatest Jew that ever lived, the greatest human being that ever lived in this one moment. Vayifen kovacho, and my father taught me this. Moshe looked this way and he looked that way. Vayar ki ein ish. He looked within himself. He went inwards and he looked this way and he looked that way. He saw the Jewish Moses he saw the Egyptian Moses. Vayar ki ein ish. And he saw that there was no man. He saw that he was not a man without a true identity. He didn't feel like a human being. He didn't feel like himself fighting who he actually was. Vayar ki ein ish. There was no man within him. He was nothing if he wasn't his true self. Bouncing between identities. It was killing him. He saw there was no man. Vayach es hamitzri. And he smites the Egyptian within himself. He chooses to be Jewish Moshe. He chooses to be a Jew. I'm telling you, in my opinion, this is when God says that is the leader of the Jewish people for eternity. Someone who gave up the luxury, the riches, the fame, the pleasures, the enjoyments, the safety, the comfort of being Egyptian royalty. He gave it up to be a part of a slave nation just because it was right, just because it was true. Moshe, and this is what I want to drill to you guys, Moses in this moment does what every single one of us is charged to do in this life, which is to listen to your soul. Listen to the still small voice inside of you that is never confused, that is never unsure, that is always clear about what is true in this life. Moses, in this moment, chooses emes. He chooses truth, even though it is so much easier to choose to be a Mitzri, an Egyptian. Vayitmenehu b'chol, and he takes the Egyptian part of himself and he buries it forever. He killed it and he buries it. And he, in this moment, this is when Moses's whole story begins. This is when he becomes Moshe Rabbeinu, our Rebbe. He becomes our leader for eternity. It's not just this generation. He is Moses he is the Jewish leader forever. The Torah will never stop being the 5 books of Moses. Just in that moment, I want to show you guys the greatness in doing that and what it can do for us. You can do this too. I can do this too. I try to do this every day. Hashem, I am choosing you today. I'm choosing you tomorrow. I'm choosing you the day after tomorrow. Still small voice, soul, you're almost impossible to hear because the world is really confusing and painful and dark because we're in exile, because we're in Galus. And I am choosing you. I will choose you every single day, just like Moses did. Because Vayar ki ein ish, because I'm no one if I'm not my true self. I'm nothing if I don't know who I actually am and live a true life. What is life if you're not being yourself? Moses becomes the greatest Jew that ever lived in this moment, and he becomes the Jewish leader for all time. He becomes almost like the owner of the Torah. Not the owner, what's it called? The Torah is called after him. It's just amazing. It's amazing. This is where Moshe's life starts, the craziness of his life. And then God appears to him. Hashem sees someone who will never give up on the Jewish people because he didn't give up on the Jew inside of himself. So that's it. Class over. 20 minutes. Okay. It wasn't that long. Thank you, Koren, for sponsoring this video. Oh, I love the Torah so much. I would kiss it, but I have lipstick on. Be in tune with yourself, listen to your still small voice, and be like Moses, because you're capable, you're able. And your story begins when you choose your true self. Just like Moses' life started, his story began when he chose emes, when he chose truth. All right, stay thirsty. Bye.